qui nous souhaite, pas qui nous souhaite la bienvenue, mais qui nous souhaite un bon travail. Et elle me dit qu'elle va bien et que la situation à Alep et que la violence continue à augmenter, mais la volonté de dépasser ça augmente aussi. Voilà, j'ai reçu aussi, on a tous, pas personnellement, mais c'était sur la page Facebook, un message de Uliana en Ukraine, hein, qui dit que voilà, il faut beaucoup prier pour eux en Ukraine.
Is it okay that I speak in English? I'm sorry, my Polish, Lithuanian, not very good. My French is okay, but anyway, see. I just want to say, first of all, a few words first about myself. I'm getting older, and it's very good to get old. I love it. And I have nothing to do, and I don't think I have nothing to. I give a lot of retreats, but I don't travel anymore. I don't go to any international councils, and I have no role in Faith and Light, and I have no role in Lush, except to give conferences. So it has the advantage of standing back. Standing back, but also looking at a world that is changing, and is changing drastically. The world of 1971 is not the world of 2014, and it will be even further from the world of 225. We're in a changing world. Young people are changing. The church is changing. I don't have to say, Pope Francois has brought an immense change. I hear everywhere, from people who are Catholic or not Catholic, "Oh, your Pope is great." I had a cameraman the other day from Canada. He said, "I'm not Catholic, but I love your Pope." So there are things that are changing. The big question is, where is hope? There's a very deep sense of despair, and particularly with young people. What is the future? What are the mondialisation? You're finding whole movements today against a certain vision of mondialisation. All sorts of new things happening. Is to change the world, you have to go down into the streets with manifestations. Situation of Kiev or in France, but in Bretagne, les bonnets rouges, things are changing. People don't believe in political world anymore. I come back to the young people. A lot of young people, where are the points of stability that will give hope? What are those things that give security in a world where we don't quite know where we're going? And we can be in a world of polarization. So the question is, how does this affect? And people are raging. I don't know if that happens, that in the communities of Lush, people are getting older. People in Faith and Light are getting older. Parents are getting older. More people of Faith and Light are in institutions. And some very good institutions, but some also less good. So we're in a world, for Faith and Light, it is very different. in 1971, there were very few institutions. People with disabilities didn't have a lot of place in the church. But it's true, the church is changing. People with disabilities are getting older. And then there's another huge change, is technology. And technology inside of institutions. How is technology used? How is the internet used? How is the Facebook used? How is the, I mean, I have no internet, I have no telephone, I have no this, that, so people can see me as a dinosaur. But I see that for the communication with young people, what they're interested is, what is an internet? I mean, there's a huge world of technology which is going to become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, I used to be surprised when somebody had that and I discovered it was a telephone. Now I discover it's an SMS, it's a GPS, it's an internet, I mean, I asked the other day, what was the degree of wine in Champagne? It interested me, in the degree of alcohol. Somebody went, in 3 minutes they told me. So we're in a new world. We're in a new world, and how can this be used for young people? I mean, so, a world that is changing, a world where there's depression. In Faith and Light, like everywhere else, people are getting older. Parents are dying, and parents who were very present in Faith and Light are now in old people's homes. So things are changing. And I think for each one of you, when you'll be giving your talk back, how things are changing in your... And what is the future? It's always the question is, who and what will Faith and Light be in 10 years' time? You see. And then the other thing is, when Faith and Light began in 1971, there were not too many things happening for people with disabilities. Now, they're all going to basketball games or God knows what. I mean, there's lots of things being done for people with disabilities. Where does Faith and Light enter into this? Because so much is being done. And yet, a lot is being done, but yet the fear and rejection of people with disabilities continues. The whole question of abortion, I mean, it is a very strong power. And the high majority of young people today, I would say two things. One is that by the films and the things they're looking at, death is omnipresent. In every film, there are at least 3 or 4 murders. With les jouets électroniques, they're taught to kill people. So there's a whole conception of death, which is different. And so in front of abortion, for young people, to say that people are being killed, it's not the same thing as a time back. Abortion has become, for many young people, just obvious. And there again, their vision of the church, they have seen the church frequently as very conservative and moralistic. So, but at the same time, there's a whole situation of drugs with young people, which is much, much deeper than we would dare believe. It is very strong, the world of drugs. And the world of drugs is not just that people can get hooked, but it shows the need to find an imaginary world where things are much better. Drugs take people away from the reality that is present and the difficulties of the present into a sort of dream world. Anyway, what would I like to say about faith and light? First of all, it is an extraordinary gift of God. I would say for our time. I would have said that faith and light was important in 1971 for people with disabilities. I would say today there's a global vision where faith and light is very important in the church and in the world. In 1971, people with disabilities were having many difficulties in being accepted in the church. Many were having difficulties in institutions or that sort of thing. So faith and light remains fundamental for people with disabilities. I'll come back to that. But what I want to say is that faith and light is important today as a vision of the world and a vision of church. And this is being strongly revealed by Francis, the Pope Francis. What strikes me about Pope Francis, and people tell me that about him, is the way he looks at people. He looks at people as if you are the person I've been waiting for the last 20 years. And somebody told me was taking pictures as each person came up, and the way he looked at them with joy. It's not surprising that in his exhortation, it's the joy of the gospel. And he is essentially a man of joy. And when he looks at people, and if you have chance to see pictures of him as he's looking at people, every person he looks at, you're a surprise. I've been waiting for you. I'm so pleased you're there. And there is something else which is coming up very strongly, is that every person is important. Every person is important. We're entering into a culture. We're entering into a culture where a lot of people see everybody as important. You are beautiful. And maybe at the heart of faith and light, the essential element of faith and light is joy, celebration, and you are beautiful. What Pope Francis is saying is that joy attracts people. Joyful communities attract people because people want joy. People want to find places where they can sing and where they can dance and where they can celebrate unity. The need for places where we can celebrate unity. I am not forgetting all the situations in the world where there are conflicts. And we could talk about Egypt, or we could talk about Syria, or we could talk about Jordania or Lebanon. We could talk about all the places where there is conflict, and of course with Ukraine. But essentially, people of our world are seeking the places of joy. What struck me when Widad, who is in my community, she's from Iraq, and she was in Lebanon not too long ago, and all the community of L'Arche came to Lebanon to meet. And the question came up, what is the mission of L'Arche in Damascus? What is the mission of L'Arche in Damascus? And the board of directors and all the members of the community council and others, they got together, and everyone. And they said, there are two things that we are called to do in Damascus. And remembering that Damascus, they occasionally hear machine guns. I was going to speak to them on Skype, but a missile had hit the electricity and there was no Skype. But the two things that came from what is the mission, the first is to celebrate life. Not to be petrified by fear, to be people of hope, to be people of celebration, not to be people of fear, not to be people who close up places of celebration. Because when you're living all the time with people with disabilities and the war is around, you're not all expected to go and be petrified by fear. Live, and live well. Live beautifully. Live hopefully. Live joyfully. The second thing they said is that we must never be people who are hiding behind walls. We must always be windows open to the light. We must never be people hiding behind walls, fearful of each other. So what they were saying is we must work to celebrate unity. We must be people of celebration, people of joy. And this is fundamentally what Pope Francis is telling us, to break out from the walls and to get together to celebrate life. You find with all the popes, and in a particular way also with the new Archbishop of Canterbury, whose name is Welby. I had 3 days with him recently. What strikes me is similarity between him and Pope Francis. He told me that when he went to see Pope Francis, there'd been all the protocol. And he said when they were just the two of them together, they laughed for about 3 minutes. They laughed because there'd been all the protocol, everybody. But when there were the two of them there, they just started laughing. To laugh is somewhat to be celebrate together, to be happy together. And he has just created in Lambeth Palace a little ecumenical community with the Chemin Neuf. And he told me his joy would that be one day he'd create a community of L'Arche inside of Lambeth, so that when people come, dignitaries come, they'll always be welcomed by people with disabilities. So we're in a world where the Pope and the Archbishop of Canterbury saying the same thing. It's, first of all, be close to the poor, be close to the most rejected, and create places of joy. It is joy. We are not there to create a world where people want to fight for truth, but to be a sign of joy. Jesus says, he prays that my joy will be in you and your joy will be fulfilled. Christians are called to be the people of joy. It's all very well to say that, but we're in front of so many difficulties. We can't always be people of joy. But somewhere to realize that this is the vision of Jesus, the creation of communities of joy. What other element do I see coming up with Pope Francis? The place to create communities. And when you look through the exhortation that he gave on the joy of the gospel, it's about creation of communities where we celebrate life because we are loved by Jesus and Jesus is present. The mystery with Pope Francis is he is saying more and more that if you go to the peripheries of the world, that's the place, the people who are the most rejected, you will find life in the peripheries. Those who have been pushed away. Because if you meet those who have been pushed away, what are they crying out for? Do you love me? That is the essence. Do you love me? Am I loved? Pope Francis, when he became the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he spent a lot of his time in the slum areas, and he discovered the whole world of the poor and the broken, who are crying out, yes, for money and status, but they're crying out even more for friendship and for love. Here we touch the mystery of people with disabilities. The mystery of people with disabilities. Two things I want to say. First is people with disabilities, St. Paul says, that they are the ones that have been chosen by God. They are chosen by God. God has chosen the weak and the foolish to confound the intellectuals and those that have power. It's chosen. And it goes on. He has chosen those that are the most rejected. And a little later on, in the same letter to the Corinthians, he says, those who are the weakest are necessary in the body. Those that are the weakest are necessary in the body. So St. Paul tells us that God has chosen the weakest, he's chosen the most rejected to confound intellectuals. What is striking about people with disabilities? I find that what strikes me is that they're all crazy. They don't like conformity. I remember when we went to see the Pope, Fabio in our community in Rome went and sat on the throne of the Pope, and he crossed his legs and he was just sitting there happy because it was the best chair. I mean, for him it's obvious. For the bishops around it was not all that obvious, and for many people it wasn't obvious, but for him it was obvious. I mean, the whole question with people with disabilities is they break down conformity. They are different. I see in my own foyer, because I'm still living in the same foyer for 30 years, eating in the same foyer. You know, Patrick can suddenly get up and start doing crazy things. He even stood on the chair the other day and started singing. I mean, they have a way of doing foolish things. They are breaking down the walls of conformity. That is, on one side, the pain and the joy of parents. The pain of parents is that they're not like all of us. One of the dangers in society is to make all people with disabilities to conform. They should be like everybody else. But they're not like everybody else. They're different. People who are Down syndrome, they're different. I mean, let's face it. And because they're different, society doesn't want them. They want to get rid of them. 96% of people with disabilities, we get rid of them because we don't know how to be with the different. To see in those who are different telling us a message. What essentially is at the heart of faith and light and lust is joy. Having fun. Having fun together, celebrating life, dancing together. Communities are born and strengthened because there is joy. That doesn't mean to say there are a whole lot of other things to be done, like good therapies, good organization, and all the rest. But essentially, the vision is a vision of joy. And this is what our world is seeking. In my own foyer, there's André. And André, not too long ago, had to go and see the cardiologist. And he came back from the cardiologist, and we were sitting at table, and we said, "How did it go with the doctor?" And he said, "Oh, it went fine." We said, "Well, what did he see in your heart?" He said, "Well, he saw Jesus." But then we said, "What does Jesus do in your heart?" And he said, "He rests. Il se repose. He rests." His first reaction, he saw Jesus, is funny. And so. But the other, he rests. He is present. He lives in my heart. Something. So, I see in my own foyer a number of people with disabilities, like Benjamin. After 9 years in my foyer, he said, "I'd like to get to know Jesus better." There is an attraction. I see now many of the people who come to our communities are not Christian, but little by little they say, "I want to get to know Jesus." There's something in the heart, because what do people with disabilities want? They want to discover that they are loved. And it is love that brings joy. It is love that brings security. It is love that brings peace. So they want to know that they are loved. That is the heart. It's not just, it's finally, do you love me? Do you love me really? Do you want to be my friend? So somewhere at the heart of L'Arche, there is joy, there is celebration, because people with disabilities discover that they are loved. Loved by Jesus. Loved by Jesus. And this is something that is very, I see this, does this desire tell me about Jesus? Tell me about Jesus. So, on the other side, we're in a world where there are more and more activities for people with disabilities. Fun, games, all sorts of things. So, faith and light what is absolutely unique in Faith and Light compared to all the other activities that are taking places in many cities about clubs. What is unique in Faith and Light? One, that it's community. We'll come back to that. Two, that it has places of joy. And three, that Jesus is being announced as the place of a friend. That is unique. What is unique in L'Arche is also its joy and its complexity, is that our communities are ecumenical. And that is an extreme joy. And we see with communities like Chemin Neuf and what the Archbishop of Canterbury has just done. He has created at the center of the place an ecumenical community which prays every day. And they're Anglicans, and they're Catholics and Orthodox. So, places where Jesus is announced, where Jesus is seen as the one that loves us, but also for us to become conscious that Faith and Light was born because of a very specific desire of God. L'Arche was born in 1964. OCH with Marie-Hélène was born a little before. And Faith and Light was born in 71. And it was born because the danger in our world is the poor are being crushed. People with disabilities are being put away. People with disabilities are not respected. People with disabilities are not being seen as important and not being seen as somebody who can bring something to the church and to the world. People with disabilities have a message, and it's a very simple message. And because it's such a simple message that we frequently don't see it. It's about love. It's about commitment. It's about seeing the other person as a gift of God. The beauty of people with disabilities is that they're not big intellectuals. They're people who are crying out for recognition, for love, and for celebration, and to have fun. To celebrate, to have fun, because somewhere they know that at the heart of the mystery of Faith and Light, there is Jesus. And Jesus is love. So, Faith and Light, I believe there's a message of Faith and Light in our world today. The other element of Faith and Light, which is unique, is community. What I've been told by people who work with young people in schools and so on, the movement for desire for community is on its way down. What I mean by that is that in 1970, everybody wanted community. Those were the years 70 to 80. You know, we'll live together, we'll go up into the mountains. In the United States, it was all the hippie people. I mean, everybody wanted community. And it was during that period that L'Arche was born, that Faith and Light was born, the desire to live together, to love each other, and to give security to one another, and to rejoice. and not to be caught up in a world of you must do this, you must do that. A place of joy, celebration, and togetherness. That is at the strength of faith and light. But it's also an element which is difficult, because people tell me today that young people are not interested in community. They're interested in doing things, they're interested in technology, but there is still a loneliness with young people. So there is that need to come together. How to stimulate the idea of togetherness. One of the elements of our world, which is becoming more and more complex, is the number of weak people. And the numbers of weak people are becoming more important than those who are capable of doing things. There's become a disproportion between those who are weak and those who are capable of fostering work. And this is becoming a serious problem. They say that young people, people living today will all live to 100. You know, I'm happy for you. But this is creating many financial problems. It's a huge problem. And this particularly in rich countries. In poorer countries, the situation is not the same. So what is happening today is there are more and more weak people. More and more people will be living a long time. And this is something which is going to affect faith and light. What happens to our communities when all our people are getting older? And then there's this discrepancy in communities where there are a lot of older people, where parents are themselves no longer coming to the meetings because they're in homes, and also what is happening to people with disabilities in institutions. And we see more and more people in institutions no longer with their families, and yet they want to be in faith and light. But anyway, so the whole element which was Marie-Hélène spoke a lot about was giving birth to small communities for children. And this same problem is affecting us in L'Arche, because many of our communities are getting older and older, and we can fall into becoming old people's homes. But there's a whole question there. So we are now obliged to welcome people around the age of 20, which in a way is rather sad, which means that we cannot welcome into L'Arche the children of parents who have kept their children and who are now 50 years old. But we cannot take in those who are 50 years old, otherwise we'll all become old people's homes. So, we're in a world that is changing. There is difficulty with young people. Ages are growing, and yet there is something new coming up. And we see this with Pope Francis, the importance of creating those places of joy. Now, I cannot in any way, I'm not there to resolve the questions that you're all living, but somewhere to believe that even if we haven't got many communities, to have a few communities that are filled with joy and hope, this is very important. We are saying in L'Arche today, the important thing is not that L'Arche grows, but that we grow down. By growing down, that there are communities really where we love each other, where we work together in love, and where is revealed the beauty of people with disabilities. There can always be a danger of wanting more and more, instead of going down to be places where there is a real life of joy and of peace. That doesn't prevent us being missionaries of joy. It's the whole vision. I mean, we have to be missionaries, but missionaries of something, which is not just having more communities. The point is not having more communities, it's having more beautiful communities. Communities where they're really radiating love, radiating a real presence of God, radiating a real presence that community is important. But it's all very well. Community is beautiful, but community is a pain in the neck. I don't know how it is for you, but because we human beings very quickly, we have difficulty working together. Communities need a lot of help. The two big questions is how to give support to communities. They are beautiful, but they can break down. It is easy to break down. How to resolve conflicts. How to help people get together to celebrate. How to help so that it's not just a things we have to do. How to give support to leaders who don't always know what to do. Because living together is never, never easy. Creating a community of love is never, never easy. We need help. We need also to discover where our own personal breakages are. There's a little phrase of Etty Hillesum, who is a young Jewish woman who died at Auschwitz. And she wrote a little book, which is her diary. At one moment she says, I'm discovering more and more I am a well, a puits. And at the bottom of the well, I am discovering that God lives there. But then she adds, but I also see there are rocks and stones which prevent me being in contact with the God that is living within me. There are all sorts of things that prevent me loving. There are all sorts of things which prevent me loving people in my community. There are all sorts of things inside of me where I want power or I want this. To live in community, we have to discover the places of brokenness. Because to love the other person, we have to also discover who I am. And in each of us, there are places of violence and of depression. And we have to know these. Community is a place where little by little we should be liberated. And we are liberated by people with disabilities. So community is not easy. Thérèse of Lisieux says, in my community there is one sister who is disagreeable for me in all things. And then she says, well, I would give her my nicest smile. Then she says, sometimes I was asked to work with her in the same services kitchen. And she said it was too much for me and I had to run away. I was a deserter. What she is saying is that living with that sister in her community brought up anguish within her. So community is not easy. We need help. And if our communities don't find some support, so the big question is how to form people to live community and how to help people live in community, how to help individually and how to help a community to grow and to deepen. And it is never, never easy. And formation. See, very quickly, faith and light can be, it's a nice place for parents because their sons and daughters have fun. But they don't see the meaning, what I'd call the ecclesial meaning, the meaning of faith and light as being a place of unity, of joy, and of peace in our world. It's not just a place of having fun, and it's not just a place for parents because it can do things for their children. It's essentially community. So, how to give formation to help people to live in community, how to help leaders to assume their role. And even though faith and light is small, it is also something that is very important and can be a sign to our world. I remember that person who had left the church and everything and went into a church one afternoon, and there was a whole group of people singing and dancing and praying, and it was faith and light. And that person who had felt not at all attracted to the church because of the elements of formality in church was absolutely subjugated by this place of young people dancing and praying and so on. And so she joined Faith and Light, and then she discovered church and she rediscovered Jesus. So Faith and Light is something beautiful. It is a place of joy and of celebration. It is a place where people with disabilities discover their true place in the church, that they are loved. Faith and Light has something special. It is also a place where coming together and praying together, even if we cannot live the Eucharist together, but we can learn to wash each other's feet together in the ecumenical reality, that we can discover Jesus together. Finally, it is a place of community, of being together, of loving each other. But to live community is never, never easy. It is a little by little a purification of self. We need help. We need help to exercise authority in community. It's never easy, and what we're seeing more and more is that people are frightened of assuming authority, of being responsible. How to help people to discover that responsibility is a beautiful thing, because responsibility is about transmitting life, making a community where people are happy and helping people with disabilities to become more fulfilled. More fulfilled, discovering what it means to be a Christian. A Christian, there is a fulfillment of our humanity and a fulfillment of our humanity with and in Jesus. Faith and Light is not just a spiritual reality, it is a profoundly human reality. It's about learning to love each other. It's about learning to help people to grow. And to love each other is that we're learning to live with the Word who became flesh. The mystery of Jesus is that he was profoundly human. So our communities are profoundly human. We have to know what it means to be human beings who are learning to love each other. And it is never easy to love. It's a long road. St. Paul defines love in a very special way in the epistle to the Corinthians. He begins by saying, if you have all the knowledge of the world and you don't have love, you're nothing. If you give all your goods to the poor and you don't have love, you're nothing. If you give your body to the flames, you're a martyr, and you do not have love, you are nothing. And what is love? Love is to be patient. It's never easy to be patient. Love is to serve. Love is not to put yourselves forward. Love is to excuse everything. It is to bear everything. It is to believe everything. And it is to hope everything. Patience, which is the first word that Paul uses. Love is patience. Patience is about hope. Patience is hope. Because we are confronted by people who are difficult, but we need hope, because that son or daughter of crises or autistic or other realities, we need patience, but we need also wisdom. Wisdom and patience. So, in our world today, the encouragement and the inspiration of Francis about joy, about going to the weakest, and about building a community is a message that he is giving to us. So it's to come back always to the essential. Our communities of faith and light are born from a desire of God. What is this desire? He said, humanity becomes one. The whole desire of Jesus is unity. Our world is a world that has created barriers. I remember going to Chile a few years ago, and I was going for Faith and Light in Chile, and I remember on the road from the airport to the city, Santiago, at one point the one who was driving me said, on the left are all the slum areas of Santiago. On the right are all the rich houses protected by military. And he said, nobody crosses the road. Everybody is frightened. There is a world of cleavages, of breakages, and the whole desire of Jesus is to bring people together. The epistle of Ephesians, St. Paul says, Jesus is our peace. Of two peoples he has made one, breaking down through the cross the barrier that separated them. We're in a world where barriers are created between people. Barriers between rich and poor. Barriers where all the situations of conflict we're seeing today in places like Syria, Lebanon, and in Ukraine, the big barriers. The barriers that goes around all of Israel, 150 kilometers of barriers. The barriers that people are creating so that there be less and less immigrants. We're in a world, there are immigrants because of the vast breakages of our world. Those in the poor countries of Africa, they're seeing the rich countries on television. They want to get there because they're dying of hunger or dying of thirst. So they must do something. And they do something by taking little boats or trying to come up from Guatemala and places into the United States because they're dying of hunger. So, Jesus is our peace. And Faith and Light is one of those places where we're bringing together two cultures. Culture of people with disabilities and the culture of those who have not. The culture of bringing people together. Why? Because Jesus wants people to come together, to meet each other who are different. So at the heart of faith and light is learning to accept the different. The different who is maybe tendencies of psychotic, autism, discovering behind the disabilities, behind sometimes the violence, there is you. There is your heart. That's where I come back to what I said at the beginning. Pope Francis is teaching us to look at people with love, to see behind their difficulties and their heart, that each person is a precious person created by God and in whom God lives. So, faith and light is a place where we learn to see and look at people with disabilities as people who have a message. It's not just to look after these poor little people. They have something to bring. And so the last thing I wanted to say is how Jesus wants faith and light to be the place of unity, working to bring people together. Those that have been pushed aside have a message to bring. And obviously, at the heart of that message, there are the parents. The parents who have suffered. The parents don't always understand. And faith and light is there to help the parents discover, through all the difficulties they might be living, that they have an important place in the church, that they have something to say, and that they have also to discover that their children are more beautiful than they can imagine. So, my hope is that faith and light will continue to deepen in a world that is changing, where young people are changing. But the message is always there. The message that every person is precious. The message that God wants faith and light to be a sign of unity and to be a sign that people with disabilities, the weak and the poor, have a special message to reveal to all of us. Basta.
Merci. On va faire une...
I think we have to come back to that reality that we are essentially a call from God. And we are called to be prophetic, a sign of prophetism. And one of the big differences we have in 71 to today is that faith and light very quickly spread all over the world. And it spread over the world for multiple reasons. One of the reasons was that many people needed a community for parents and many communities began not necessarily because it was a call from God. It was a very human call. And one can understand that, where parents could have a place where they could meet and so on. So what I'm hearing is the need to come back to our charter. We have a beautiful charter. And it's very clear what the charter says about faith and light. What I would say is prophétisme is a vision of God for our world. To be prophetic is to live something which is maybe not well accepted, but is a message for the world. What I'm saying there is the importance is not the number, but the quality. And the danger can always be desire of numbers, whereas it's a question of going down deep and rediscovering the Charter and rediscovering faith at the heart of our communities. When Jesus was born, there were not too many people, but there were the shepherds, and then there were the magi or the kings or whoever. Let's just say Jesus, it was very small, but he wanted to become visible. So smallness does not mean disappearing, and it doesn't mean just closing in on ourselves. And being open doesn't mean we want to make more communities. We want to radiate a truth, radiate a vision. And that vision is the realization that people with disabilities have something very important to say. They say something about faith, but they say a lot about joy. They love fooling around. So somewhere at the heart of people with disabilities is the message of joy. It is evident today, it is very important that parents discover this, and that there's a whole message that parents have given to other parents, which is absolutely vital. But what I'm trying to say is the acceptance that maybe we'll become smaller, but we must, the communities that are there, they need to be well-formed and well. So not to worry about those communities that are little by little dying, but to see that the seeds of new communities where there are young people who are, that means we have to reflect on how can young people get involved. How can they assume responsibilities? How can they become convinced that we have a beautiful message and a new message to give to our world, which is about joy, which is about community, which is about the mystery of people with disabilities and their particular call for a spirituality of love. So what I'm hearing is, on one side, we might be getting smaller. That means that we must come back to the depth which was written into our charter,